Redditors who have been clinically dead, what did you experience in death, if anything? I was dead for 6 minutes. I was laying on the gurney, and I was getting colder. Somewhere my body started warming up and everything became really calm and peaceful. I was not longer in pain. All the noise from her just went away. It was really enjoyable. I was thinking about my daughter, and I was remembering all the things we had done. Slowly it was just black and nothing. There was no knowledge of anything. I explain it as it was like before I was born. Then the worst thing in the world is being revived. I started hearing loud noises. I felt this massive pain. Then there was the nastiest stench ever. The smell was like every dead animal had crawled in my nose. The smell was so bad I started vomiting. I remember the DRs turning me on my side and watching my vomit spray on a nurse. Dying was the most pleasant thing I have ever experienced, and being revived the worst. I was 19 when I had my first hip replacement surgery. Born with a bad hip. The doctor put me under, and then all of a sudden it was like I was opening my eyes but felt nothing. No pain, no sadness, nothing. Apparently I flatlined for 90 seconds due to complications. As I had my eyes open I began to rise out of my body and stand next to it. How freaky is it to see yourself from outside your body? The thing is I never let my left hand let go of my body's left hand. It felt attached. The second I saw the nurse use the heart starting thing, I was jolted upright, back in my body. Not really sure what happened and it still freaks me out to this day. My daughter was 4 and developed pneumonia. Her breathing would stop in her sleep, so we took her into the emergency room. She was there for a total of 5 days. For the first 3 days her health kept deteriorating, and on the 3rd day my girlfriend got a call that her mother had collapsed and was taken to the hospital. She was without oxygen for 20 minutes and was declared brain dead. That night my daughter woke up and asked about grandma. No one had said anything to her or in the room with her. We asked her what did she mean. She told us that grandma came to her in a dream and said it's not your time yet. I'll go for you. Immediately the next day she was almost 100% better. I coded after surgery. I remember being able to see and hear everything and understand what was happening, but I couldn't physically feel anything. It was deeply unsettling. My heart also stopped after surgery 3 years ago. I only remember them getting me back and drifting between darkness and seeing the nurses panic. Like you mentioned, I felt nothing and was just an impartial observer. The aftermath was the worst. Realizing how close I was to oblivion and recalling the dissociation was horrifying. People often say, oh, I'm not worried, she's a fighter, when someone gets very ill. But me? I feel like I was just ready to watch myself fade into the dark despite being content and having things to live for. Unsettling is exactly the right word. That was the weird part for me too. The impartiality. It's like the emotional part of my brain stopped working before the intellectual part did. I basically was just patiently waiting to find out whether I was going to be dead or not. I had no feeling about it at all at the time. The unsettled feeling came later. My wife and I discussed this at length 4 years ago. She died twice in 3 months, needing full resuscitation both times. Both were lengthy rescues. One resuscitation was off and on for nearly 40 minutes. I asked her later, when she had recovered, if she remembered anything at all during the time she was clinically dead. She remembered nothing. Blackness. No light. No relatives and former pets waiting for her. Just black. Thankfully, also no pain. She finally passed 18 months ago, and I hope she felt no pain or worry the final time. Edit to add. It started with 2 spontaneous brain bleeds. Technically, it started with her having lupus. The first brain bleed led to her passing, but they did a craniotomy, revived her, then a rebleed. The trauma from all that caused her lupus to set fire, which led to complete kidney failure and another cardiac arrest, passing and recovery, which led to 2 strokes. She recovered enough to be home and mostly independent, but having to go to dialysis 3 times a week for 3 years. She passed the final test to get on the kidney transplant list on Wednesday and had a massive cardiac/respiratory event at dialysis on Friday where she passed again, but was kept alive on life support. I waited a week hoping for recovery, but we disconnected life support per her wishes, a topic we had talked about many times. I don't know what I experienced while I was dead, but when I woke back up, so to speak, I remember wanting to experience it permanently. See, I don't think I can really post my experience here because I wasn't deemed clinically dead, but I did get hit by a car once when I was about 13, and I will never forget the experience that came afterwards. I was biking when a lady hit me with her car. I had a moment prior to being hit where I knew it was going to happen, but it was far too late for me to actually do anything about it. I braced for impact, got hit, and went straight into this state of complete utter silence. I didn't see anything. I didn't hear anything. No smells, no thoughts, no feelings. I just simply existed in this peaceful black bubble, and it was the most at peace I've ever been in my life. It felt like I had been there for hours honestly, but really it had only been a few seconds before I woke up and everything came back. The loud noises, the pain from being hit, seeing all the cars etc. It's crazy though, it was one of the most amazing feelings I've ever experienced. Yup, I had an experience in my sleep where I drove off a cliff, and after a couple seconds of panic, I had an overwhelming sense of calmness, peace and quiet surround me, and I just wanted to stay in it. It wasn't exactly a true near-death experience, but I feel that if I dreamed it as actually happening then the feeling would have been the same. I didn't realize this was a thing. I jumped from a building, 5 stories, and as I fell all I felt was peace. I hadn't hit the ground yet though, so it could be just that I knew life would be over instead of what you guys are experienced. Unfortunately I blacked out before I hit the ground and only remember bits and pieces for the next few days. I died twice after I got MRSA into my heart area after a major surgery. I don't remember much of anything when I was out. Cliché as it was I saw a light, but damn that year sucked. When I was 15 I was scheduled to do a tilt table test. They lean you up at an angle on a table because I was consistently experiencing dizziness and fainting spells. After about 20 minutes the doctor tilted the table back and I could feel myself passing out. I got severe tunnel vision and lost like 95% of my eyesight, like looking through a straw, and then I blacked out. I remember hearing the doctor call the code and my father cussing at the doctor that he killed me. I remember hearing a lot of slamming and banging around, which I assumed was the crashed cart and nurses shoving into this small testing room. I felt a pressure on my chest, like when you have someone stand on your back to crack it, which I found out later was the nurses doing CPR. I saw an array of vivid colors kind of dancing around forming objects in the dark. The scariest thing was how peaceful it felt. Just pure 100% peace. No panic, no pain, no sadness, nothing, just bliss. I coded for just under 2 minutes, and as soon as I came to and opened my eyes, I felt seriously angry and hostile. I started ripping off whatever I could get my hands on and yelling at the doctor to get me off the table. Clinically dead on 2 separate occasions. I didn't experience any visions or light and I didn't feel anything at all. It was like a switch was flipped and my existence was just shut off. Coming back was another story. Slowly I was able to hear the voices of those around me fading in, and they slowly got louder until I was able to open my eyes. That's it. Nothing spectacular. 1 second you're here, 1 second you're not. Not mine, but the head of my program was in a horrible car accident. She was dead for a few minutes on the scene while paramedics worked on her. She said it was the most amazing feeling she's ever experienced. It was black nothing, but that was perfectly fine, and she felt a comfort she can't even explain. She remembers being angry at the man working on her when she finally came back to her body because she wanted to stay there. She told us she can't wait to experience it again when it's really her turn. Edit. I'm really pleased this resonated so strongly with so many of you. I wanted to add some detail about her. She's not religious in the slightest, and she actively quashes our ghost stories and stuff. Mortuary students, because she only believes in tangible things, so she fully turned me into a believer. Felt it's important I make a distinction she was very adamant about when telling us this story. She's not advocating suicide. She stressed that she isn't telling us she's trying to reach this place again, but that when it was her time she was going to be comfortable embracing it. Back in college, a very heavy-set friend of mine had some sort of cardiac event on the couch right next to me. I had been high all day long and didn't want to be there when the police were called, so I did everything in my power to get his heart pumping again. He was so pissed when his heart started back up again. Said it was an amazingly calm darkness and couldn't believe I wouldn't let him stay in it. Frick me for saving your life, Brian, right? Friend of mine described it as deeply relaxing and that she could feel herself drifting away but was brought back just as she was ready to leave. After that, she embraced life and death. She said she doesn't fear death anymore since it was so relaxing to experience. I was electrocuted by about 13,800 volts. The doctors say it's likely the first hit stopped my heart and the second one started it before I was pulled like a lifeless corpse to safety. I remember experiencing the darkest dark and the most silent silence. I ceased to care that I was dying. Time seemed to change. It could have been hours it seemed. It was only about 30 seconds. I felt as though I was floating and floated towards something that I eventually realized was my body in reality. Upon joining with whatever it was I was floating towards, I became self-aware in my body and heard the electricity making horrible noises and knew I was in danger. From there it was a horribly painful experience where I lost most of my toes due to tissue death and had severe electrical burns on all 4 limbs. More surgeries than I care to count, and seeing the round bone ends of my toes that were freshly amputated still haunts me a little. Edit. Thank you everyone for helping me understand something that happened over 12 years ago. I was in the hospital for about a month inpatient and then for 10 months daily as an outpatient. Basically sent me home for my mental sanity, but needed daily attention. I got addicted to painkillers, had to learn to walk again, and had to see a pain management therapist. It was horrible at times, but eventually the pain began to subside. I went back to school and became an engineer, and I don't think I'd be where I'm without this thing happening. Really strange to think that I'm in some way grateful now. Also, I can't watch horror anymore. Hollywood actually does a very realistic job. My girlfriend is anaphylactic, and it is triggered by a chemical called salicylate, found in pretty much every food. When she was in high school she had her first big reaction, and the school nurses refused to administer her EpiPen, adrenaline shot, until the ambulance got there. Now obviously, having an anaphylactic reaction doesn't give you a lot of waiting time, so by the time the ambulance got to her school she was in pretty bad shape and barely conscious. The paramedics immediately administered one of her EpiPens, called the nurses freaking twats, and loaded her into the ambulance as her mother arrived. She continued to fade, so they gave her a direct injection of adrenaline this time. Still nothing. They give her a second direct injection of adrenaline, and this time it hits her about 30 seconds later all at once, and her heart fails. She stops breathing, no pulse, nothing. Dead to the world. For about 2 minutes and 46 seconds she was clinically dead. And the scariest thing is, she saw nothing. She tells me that when you are losing consciousness you can't tell the difference between waves of drowsiness and when your body actually shuts down. All she saw was the darkness of her eyelids, and it felt like going into an extremely calm sleep where she couldn't hear or feel anything, and she didn't mind it. All despite the fact her mother and the paramedics were screaming at her to keep her eyes open and the ambulance was flying towards the hospital. She miraculously just came back to life almost 3 minutes later as they were giving her chest compressions, and the cardiologist that assessed her later stated that all the adrenaline in her body was enough to not only stop her heart, but to also restart it with the little help from the paramedic pumping it around. But still to this day, she can't differentiate falling asleep after a long day and dying. I was dead for a very short period of time, like 30 seconds to a minute. There's a big misconception about it. It's not like sleeping at all. I'll try to explain. There's always a sort of white noise in the back of my mind. It quiets down when I sleep, but it's still there. I never noticed it before I died, but I do now. I don't want to romanticize death, but when I was out, it was like this perfect nothingness. And nothingness is so hard to imagine normally, but once you experience it, and they bring you back, part of you wishes you could have stayed. There's no positive feelings there, obviously, but it takes away everything bad too. All your stress, the nightmares, the troubles, all gone. Just nothing exists. It's beautiful in a way. I'm not suicidal at all, and hope to live the rest of a long and happy life. But I'm very much looking forward to a lack of consciousness when I do eventually pass again, and I can honestly say I don't fear death anymore. I know 3 people that have been clinically dead and have come back. What they described is something much different than what people are talking about here. They all said, if you paraphrase, that it feels as if you're passing out. Someone compared it to odding on whippets, nitrous oxide, a feeling of your conscience slowly getting focused into one point in the exact middle of your head, while your limbs lose feeling in a tingling, pleasant way, and then you lose consciousness. One girl said that when she came back into conscience she was hallucinating because she had no idea what was going on, and that she started dreaming of something safe. I pointy her mother hugging her in a warm bed. Thank you for watching. Subscribe and like for more future content.